Welcome back. In this session, Fernvaille CEO Gürcan Bey and Fernvaille CEO Hakan Bey will be with us. And the new regulations, share-based mass funding, and new generation entrepreneurship will be talked about. I'd like to invite them now. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hakan Bey is also here. I'm trying to start my video. Can you see it on your screen? Yes, I clicked OK. There are many friends here. I resent it. Can you please switch on and off your cam? Sorry for the delay. Yes, it's okay now. You can start when you're ready. Hi, Gürcan. Hi, Hakan. How are you? Thank you. We're all right. We continue to our works today. Actually, it's very important today for us. It's very good to be here in this Indieway event. Let me make the introduction part and then I'll give the floor to Gürcan. It will be in a dialogue mode. My name is Hakan Yıldız. I am the founder of the Finder platforms. And for long years, I have been working on the entrepreneurship financing and the development of new generation investment tools. And in this sense, both about the entrepreneurship investment funds and investment networks and share-based mass funding platforms are managed by me. And especially about the access to funding for the entrepreneurs, I will be informing you. And after this introduction, now I'm giving the floor to Gürcan. Hi, everyone. We have started this with Tolga. Actually, there are many friends here. Many of you know me from the industry for nearly 16 years. I have been acting in the Turkish gaming industry. Our last attempt was that with FAM. We have established a new company about gaming technologies, and we are also trying to share our knowledge and our learnings from this side with you. Gürcan, if you allow me, I will try to mention about some regulations in this system. There's a development process in Turkey. I'm going to inform all of the attendees about this and what kind of a system here is in force in Turkey. I'll be enlightening them about this system and the regulation. The process started in 2015 in Turkey. The Turkish Grand National Assembly subunits were sent an offer of law. Actually, this offer was about the crowdfunding and its regulation. And about this regulation, since that time, there has been intensive works and the shareholders, the capital market boards, and Istanbul Takas Bank and other legal establishments contributed much for this regulation. And in the end, in 2017, the capital market boards added something, and in the end, the first regulation was approved, and a secondary regulation has been drafted by the same boards. And in Turkey, a revolutionary declaration was declared in May. And in this scope, mass funding was started to be used as an instrument for funding. As you know, it has reached up to high numbers over the world, and in Turkey it's quite new. But the efforts in that sense started in 2015. After the declaration of the Communique, we started to catch up with the global trend. And in 2019, we established our company with the permission of the Capital Markets Board. And in 2020, in August, we applied for a license. And in Turkey, now we are active in mass funding. And like an intermediary company, you need to get a license from the Capital Markets Board. And in 2021, we got our permission from the board. And in May, we started our first campaign for mass funding, and this is a new instrument in the market. And until now, we have put forward 9 campaigns, 5 succeeded, and they achieved in gathering the required fund. And there are thousands of investors in the system, and the system is quite new, but it's really maturing fast. And now the investors put less efforts, and there is no assurance within the fund. Therefore, the finance is really available. And these are great advantages in the process. And the point that we have reached, we need to talk about the figures. $564 billion was the overall volume last year, and 110 billion was allocated for the entrepreneurs last year. And actually the funding is depending on borrowing, and the level is quite good at the moment in Turkey. Another good news is that a few months ago, the Capital Markets Board also declared a draft communique about the borrowing system, and they gathered some opinions about this, and it will be finalized soon. And we are now able to compare the figures in Turkey with the world. And in the first section, I want to give you these figures. Over the world, the individual average is around $88 million, and we are far beyond this. Therefore, our figures now around over 200 per capita, because this has been a phenomenon which is highly accepted in Turkey. Our figures are, of course, in Turkish lira currency. The funding is therefore lower than when compared to the world, but in the ecosystem of entrepreneurs, the transactions will be higher, and the world average, which is around 300 and 350 millions, will be achieved soon. And the statistics at the moment are predictive for these, actually. And Gürcan, now I will also talk about the operation of the system, but I would like to give the floor to you in that respect. But I have a question to you as passing the floor. The first examples of the system were quite important. We were seeking for brave entrepreneurs, because these would be the first users of the system, and there were many risks in the face of them. In order to eliminate the risks, of course, we put our efforts, but thanks to Gürcan, he was really courageous about this, and thanks to him, we broke many records. And my question is, how did you decide? What was your motivation in that sense? And also, there are 544 investors to reach the fund you have reached. What were your feelings and what were your efforts in that respect? The floor is yours. Thank you very much for your kind question. Of course, share-based mass funding. When we were starting this process, of course, there were some question marks in our minds as well. The most important question was that now there were many companies, there were many company partners, because the structures of the startups are quite flexible, as you know. And what kind of flexibility we could provide on our side was our question. And with the help of yours and with the help of the community, we overcome the process. Actually, only the qualified investors had the right to vote in the board. Therefore, the most important motivation of ours was that in February and March, we started a Kickstarter campaign. We are going to organize a Kickstarter campaign in February and March, and we started our preparations. And we will be Kickstarters, and as a nature of this, in the background, a community is required. And for this community, we came up with the idea of share-based mass funding as a background for this. And also brand representatives and players were to be included in this community, because this company is ours and theirs. When we win, they will also win. And therefore our estimations was quite right. And I talked directly to many investors, and we negotiated many things with them. And they also owned the process, and we consulted to our attorneys about the legal process. And when there was a server requirement, for example, we could also gather technical consultancy from the partners, and that was a huge community, and it was a real success. And for our success, actually, in the share-based mass funding, we analyzed our investors very well. And you also supported us in terms of press and media, and through Facebook ads, Instagram ads, we achieved a masses. We could reach the masses. And we evaluated the returns, actually. We analyzed the investor profiles. We searched in detail the previous projects, and the whole structures of the investors were analyzed, and we all examined their Twitter and Facebook pages. And first, we saw that those investors were giving importance to public declarations in the stock exchange. And with these investors, I think we could get on very well, and that brought our success. And here, the gaming industry is very important in Turkey. Yes, you're right, especially Grim Games and Peak Games are quite supportive for the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And rather than the exits, the ecosystem was contributed very well by the investors, and the attraction of the investors could be gathered towards the ecosystem. Therefore, your investor tour was quite influential. Actually, your demand for investment was not very high. It was quite reasonable. Therefore, the demands were at high levels, which is a source of happiness for us, because we saw that the investors were ready to invest twice as much as your request. And your investment tour could gather more than 1,000 people if you had more time. So congratulations for your campaign. You managed it very well. I also have another question for you. I'm also acting like a chair of the session, but I'm curious about what you're going to tell, because you are the person who implemented the system, who achieved the success. Actually, in mass funding, of course, you're going to be very successful at Kickstarter. You have a serious community there, but your sole purpose is not only a Kickstarter. What are your opinions about the company established in the US? What would the future of the company be? And another question is that you have good connections established during the campaign. You shared many of them with me. What those connections brought to you, and what would the direction of Fonbulucu be through these connections? Yes, I will try to answer your question. Of course, we established our enterprise in the US not only for the Kickstarter, but there are other dimensions of our purpose. We need a huge human power. At the side of the Pixie game, we still need more human resources. And about one of the purposes of establishing an enterprise in the US is that, of course, with the additional funds we gathered for the Kickstarter, we would complete the prototype of our game, and through the US, we're a Turkish company, and negotiating with a publisher in the US is not that easy. There are differences to connect with an US publisher as a game developer and as a publisher. So we want to go there to the publishers as an enterprise established in the US. Especially during your campaign, you received many cooperation offers. When you evaluate these offers, what would the direction of Fernvaille be in the future? Yes, we received many offers. Many of you may not know the infrastructure of Fernvaille, but together with NFT, actually our game is a play-to-earn game. It will grow day by day, and at the side of the Megatra, we used to have some connections, and the new feature, it would be there will be much more gains. Thank you, Gürcan. Actually, the answers to this question were quite useful. While explaining the system, I will also touch upon many issues. When an entrepreneur comes to us with a certain target, this will be an advantage for the entrepreneur, because the future steps will already be estimated based on the initial goals. You were like that, and we were very glad to work with you. You mentioned about your company, and 3 months ago, while you were applying for the system, you already mentioned about your company, and your steps were already identified, and this was really good, and this is one of the most important drivers of your success, because your goals, your targets were already determined. And there may be some entrepreneurs who are listening to us, and these are exemplary for them. I want to share my screen now with you to show you the operation of the system. If we understand the operating principles of the system, it will be better used by the investors and entrepreneurs. I guess you can see my screen. Here you can see the system integration of the mass funding. I will not go into many technical details, but here our regulator is the Capital Markets Board. The system is regulated by the board and all the related rules have been identified, and the inspection is also done by the board. And what we are trying to tell is that it has been turned into a capital market instrument. There are platforms throughout the process, and in Turkey, these platforms are established complying with certain rules. There are eliminations. While establishing these platforms, there is a serious inspection, just like establishing a bank, just like establishing an intermediary agency. And a license is obtained from the Capital Markets Board. And upon obtaining the permission, the certificate, they can operate. And there are also other shareholders in the system. One of them is the capital market instruments. Actually, the central registry is also a company who's a shareholder. It may be, you may be unfamiliar with this central registry agency, because all the registrations are all followed up by this central registration agency, and the entrepreneurs do some investment tours in a year, and there are certain limits for the entrepreneurs to raise funds, and those controls are all done by the central registration agency, and there are now nearly 11 million enterprises who can collect funds over the system, which are all controlled by the central registration. This limit is quite adequate for the new enterprises. And the secondary task of the central registration agency is that when the entrepreneurs demand for shares, they sign up in e-government gateway, and without need for any notary public transactions, the shares can be directly obtained by the investors from the enterprises. And generally in Turkey, there are some methods used by the enterprises, some traditional methods such as partnership agreements, notary public certifications, etc. But all of these procedures are actually eliminated in the system. And there are now 3 enterprises who transferred their shares through the system directly without need for other procedures. And the central registration agency is doing all these works. And Takas Istanbul is another organization. Gürcan, can you take the floor, please? As a person who is not familiar with the capital markets boards, I can explain it to you. As also mentioned by Hakan Bey, and from many capital markets instruments are kept digitally, and here trust is of course in the foreground, because there is an entrepreneur you do not know and you invest in that entrepreneur, and during this process all the investments are done through Takas Bank, and until the allocation of the shares by the enterprise. Gürcan, you're doing very well. I can take back the floor. Sorry for the interruption. Yes, Gürcan is right. Takas Bank is another company, it's another affiliate of Borsa Istanbul. About the vehicles, about the assets, they have a role. It's an important bank. There are 3 controls upon this: the central bank, the board, and the ministry are all supervising this bank, and also the money gathered by the enterprises are supervised by this bank. And actually, the investors, this is some kind of assurance for the investors actually, because until the allocation of the money against the shares, all these monies are kept by Takas Bank. These are quite important, so I just wanted to highlight them. The system is very safe, both for the enterprise and the investor. And through the inclusion of innovation, the system has been simplified actually. Some bothering procedures have been eliminated. The funds, actually, after the completion of funding, the company is established within a certain period of time, and then together with the central registration agency, the shares are allocated and the fund is transferred to the entrepreneur. And I want to share another screen now. Upon this slide, we can talk a little bit more. Here, actually, our approach is presented as a 360 degrees for an investment. Actually, at different times, at different levels, the investment needs are from the idea phase until the establishment and producing a product. The entrepreneur has different levels, and entrepreneur needs different levels of funding during this process, and therefore fund-based, share-based fundraising system has been established accordingly. There are some system members and who become system members who are the investors and who search for the entrepreneurs who need investments. And while collecting money from the communities, on the other hand, money can be collected from the corporate investors, and these are called VCs. And when the investors invest in these companies, the public also builds this trust, and the public also starts to invest in that enterprise as well. Actually, all kind of investments is possible through this system, and we're operating this in the system. This may seem quite complex for you at the very beginning, but in fact, all the regulations are complied with, and the system is supervised and inspected at all stages. Now, I would like to give the floor to you, Gürcan. In this system, where will we see you? As you may also know that for our vertical slice prototype, we have gathered the needed funds within a very short period of time, and within 5 or 6 months we thought it would take, but actually within just 60 days we gathered the funds required. We are also in contact with an investor from Belgium. It will be completed soon. Meanwhile, there are some investment requests. Despite the campaign is over, there are still some requests and demands for investing in your company. More people want to invest in your company. In this stage, I want to mention about the questions about the entrepreneurship financing. Traditionally, we know that in the early stages or after the seeding period, the investment needs of the enterprises increase, and sometimes the hindrances cannot be overcome, unfortunately. But in the Technopolis, we talked to some of the enterprises, and in order to survive, for an enterprise, the average survival period is unfortunately around 14 months, because there are many unestimated, unexpected costs. And at the first place, they give some of their shares, and sometimes some processes can be more challenging to overcome. About this, there are some data, both positive and negative data will be shared. Actually, angel and investorship terminology was started to be used in Turkey a few years ago, but their number, the angel investor number, is around 600, and my number is also 546. And when we look at the general Turkish population and the magnitude of the entrepreneurship ecosystem, this number is quite low. Of course, when we established the angel investorship network, we tried to bring a different perspective. If it is not possible to develop this angel investorship through these traditional methods, a new method is required. So we developed a digital platform, and we got a permission from the ministry. So within 3 months, we reached 112 angel investors. So within just 3 months, we included 112 angel investors in the system.
There's a problem for the investors to access the entrepreneurs. Let me just summarize. There are a lot of enterprises in technoparks. To get together with them, they need to organize demo days, and the angel investor networks, they don't really participate in these networks, and an investor cannot really visit those places one by one. We have incubation centers as well, but again, we have limited participation in both online and physical. So in the ecosystem of enterprise, we have problem for the entrepreneurs to have access. So it basically goes through digital. I mean, we can overcome this issue with the digital. An enterprise that is listed in our list, for example, for 60 days, for example, Mr. Gürcan had open door policy, and with credit card and EFT, you can have investment actually. And from Mr. Gürcan's videos to other details like financial projection, competition analysis, target audience analysis, market analysis, and anything that an investor would need, Mr. Gürcan presented it to them. And then, yeah, you received a lot of questions, right? They had a chance to ask questions to entrepreneurs, and Mr. Gürcan shared all the updates with the investors. Furthermore, we received very beautiful participation, by the way, in online meetings. They got together with the investors directly, and this direct gathering offered a chance to get to know the investor better. So in the financing of the entrepreneurs, well, we believe that all these indicate that we have presented beautiful tools. Mr. Gürcan, what did you experience in your direct gathering with the investor? I don't want to guide you, but you just talk about whatever you want to talk about. Thank you. As I said, the investors exhibited a huge potential. I tried to get together with everyone who reached me out via Twitter, and on the system of Fonbulucu, for example, ask for a meeting. We have a function on the website, so I got together with 3-4 investors like that. I presented the business plans with them, and we convinced them for the investment tour. I'm very sorry for the phone voice. What matters here is that in Fonbulucu, in a fund finder, it is important that we have a well-designed infrastructure. For example, the investors that invested like 1, 2, or 10 liras, once they realize that the system is trustworthy, they had a much better feeling for us. And in the background, we have SPK, and we also have Istanbul Exchange, and we had questions about our future plans and our target audience. We had a clearly stated target audience and risk analysis and market analysis. So we opened the business plan quite transparently to them, and we had quite all right meetings with them. From what you say, I understand that the interest of the investor, well, it is driven by the motive to make money, of course, but the investors want to take part in the stories that they would help create. So the investors that come through our system, for example, they want to be a part of the story that Gürcan Serbest would create. I saw that very clearly. I think that was one of the best motivations, and it brings us that it's important that the entrepreneurs have good communication with the investors. If this communication is set up well, financials and other issues are kind of less important. At the beginning, before anything else, we're humans, we're social creatures. There was I shared via Twitter that we started establishing our company. I realized that I have become friends with most of our investors. They started asking whether they could come to Florida with us and similar things. So people do invest, and of course, the primary aim here is making money, but they also want to know to whom they are investing. I have witnessed many times that they follow very closely how you respond to the questions. So the investors are looking into that as well. So how fast we are responding to the questions, and in the Q&A system of Fonbulucu, how transparent the answers are. So they're looking into them, and this helps you earn the trust of the investor. I think we have accomplished that. At this point, maybe I should add the communication between investor and entrepreneur is very important, but the timing is also very important. And we also realize that, we hear things like, this enterprise is being led by this and that people, and they received that much investment. We get to know about those initiatives, those enterprises at the last moment. We are investors as well. So there was a problem for the investors to have access to enterprises. Maybe some of them wanted to join in those investment tours, and some of them wanted to ask questions, but they couldn't. So the investors have been able to reach out to you in a very easy fashion. So this tool worked quite all right. And um, with this system, the visibility of the enterprise is increasing very much. So it's not just about collecting money. From among 544 investors who could help you grow bigger and manage your networks, there would be a lot of people. So there would be a lot of people to do that. A high number of investors would be there. So managing those relations would provide a lot of benefit. I'd like to add one last thing and give the floor back to you. As the investors could reach out to enterprises, I think we're going to see a serious increase in the number of investors. We're talking about an investment system that is spreading at the base level. So people could be investors with 1 Turkish liras, but looking into statistics, like 0.3% of the people invested 1 lira. They give a lot more than that. So in the coming couple years, the enterprises will attract tens or hundreds of thousands of new investors. So they're gonna, the angel investing networks and other capital funds, people are gonna start funding the initiatives, and it makes me feel happy to see that we have such a resource. Absolutely, and I believe it's very important for the gaming sector. There's a rising interest in investment on gaming sector, but it is pretty much focused on hyper casual games, and it makes sense. The development cost of a game in our style, for example, would be like about $2 million. So rather than investing like $2 million on a single company, it makes better sense for the investors to invest on 20 similar companies, let's say $100,000 each. So with that system, with investment is spreading, uh, the game developers are going to function better. So there's going to be a very big benefit for the gaming sector with this system. Exactly, and I think alike in the coming period, a lot of initiatives with low initial cost would be funded via our system, and they would move on with the next phase. So when I speak with institutional investors like angel investor networks or enterprise capital networks, they once they graduate from us, they're going to be ready for a lot of things, and that makes me happy. An entrepreneur, when they apply to us, we don't have any corporate conditions. They can apply to us without establishing the company, and then they could establish the company. We give them time to do so. So with the application, um, as the application process is managed well, this process itself is making the entrepreneurs ready for the coming phases. They express themselves better. A lot of entrepreneurs have problems about documentation, financials, and communication. So an entrepreneur could go out on a tour or not, but they would understand what the investors want from them. As a person that experienced this, what do you think? Yes, I have a lot of entrepreneurs here, and you know, there's the pitch decks, and then afterwards you have to do business plannings. And I'm very sorry again. So they look into the business plans. I recommend that they look into that form because you have a valuation form. How do I evaluate the companies, for example? I recommend that they look into that. On the other side, you said, the corporate entrepreneurs are looking into this issue very seriously. Once we started with 44 investors, we started exporting um, shares via exchange banks, and we came to a point where the uh, exchange companies came in, let's say, 20 years. So the I recommend those who are looking for investment. Thank you very much. We can call this yes, corporate, but this is not really a slow corporate mechanism. But as a last word, I can say that Mr. Gürcan's company, their shares are being followed by the central authority, and each share has its own code. So an investor from around the world, from anywhere in the world, they can purchase a share, Fernvaille Incorporated, and this brings a lot of advantage without anything specific. They can do investment, and then they basically have the share transferred to them, and that brings a lot of advantage. I think we're out of time. I hope we have been useful. Let me say a couple of things more, and you do the closing. Thank you very much. It was important for me to be here. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak my mind. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Hakan. We have some questions. Well, there's a question that was funding not directly to the company. Does it not scare the investors to collect funding to a company that is recently established? The first one, you had it. You talk about that, and then let me respond to the part whether it scares the investor or not. Well, you invest in the company and people get your shares. So the investment is directly on the company. So we can provide a lot of examples. Let's say you have a project that would function, that would run well, and you can establish another company for that. I have two different, the first one is for Nela, the other one is Negente. And in the Negente, we create simulation projects, and it follows different processes. And for that, we have we wanted to get separate funding, and we wanted to go corporate in a separate way for that part. So the investor would basically want from you, as let's say angel investor, Mr. Hakan has much more experience, but in my own processes, I realized that, let's say there's a process in my company, and the company wants to run other different processes, and when the investor comes, they want to establish, for example, sometimes new companies. Yeah, that happens. So they establish new companies, and yeah, okay, that's what I have to say. Couple sentences from me. For an enterprise to be funded, once the funding is successful, you have to establish a corporation, and if you're going to sell your shares, it has to be a corporation. So there are two different types of investors. The first one is skilled and the other one is unskilled. I'm not going to go into details, but both of them, if you identify them, for example, we don't give the right to vote to unskilled investors. So the entrepreneur is the boss here. What you explain the details of your campaign, and the investor sees that, and they follow your rules. They're not scared. Don't worry about that. So about the explanation table, let me just give you an example. Let's say throughout the whole process, you mention what you're going to do, and you're gonna you tell them how and where you're going to use the fund collected. There's an investment committee. It's a whole different thing, by the way. The investment committee, once, yes, you have to provide correct data, of course. If you provide a false information, a member of that investment committee, well, they would be responsible in their approval as well. There's one last question, a very brief one. Very brief, please, very brief. Would you like to read it? I'm going to read it. What if the project fails? How would the investors get their money back? If they sent the money via EFT or other ways, the money is the fund is kept at the exchange bank, so at the barter bank. So if the project is successful, then the process moves on. If it fails to do so, the money is returned by the bank. Let me just have a quick correction. The project being successful here has to do with the campaign being successful. Let's say I established a company as Fernvaille, and I planned that the game would sell 100,000, but it sold 10,000, and I made loss, not profit. So in that situation, the investors are not getting their money back. So when you make an investment, you become a partner. It's not like, you cannot really say at any point that you can leave because you don't want it anymore. So it is between 1 to 5 years. So you're becoming a partner to the company. So you're going to be responsible in proportion with your share. So if you invested 1,000 liras, you're going to be losing 1,000 liras most. Thank you very much for your time and the information that you shared. Thank you once again. Thank you. Bye-bye.